Hey, everybody, this is Andy Timmons. I'm a guitar player based in McKinney, Texas, just north of Dallas. And very happy to be here on Talkin' Blues with my friend Mako, and looking forward to getting to know you guys.
Let me begin by asking you about that 4-year-old kid walking around with that red plastic guitar playing Stepping Stone.
Yeah, you know that bit of my story. I still know it. Tricky part. Well, that was, I remember vividly, my older brother, I think probably John, showed me that lick. And so the household, I was born in 63, so that photo that's on the internet would have been taken in 67 or 68. So there's always guitars around the house, and my brothers were buying all the 60s, music as it came out, starting in 63 with the, late 63, early 64 with the first Beatles singles. And then, of course, Stepping Stone is the Monkees, the prefab four as they're known. And so, but it was all in Dave Clark 5 and Kinks and Animals, Herman's Hermits. That's the music that was just, all in the household. And my brothers also had a couple acoustic guitars around the house, the old Silvertone Sears acoustic guitars that so many families seem to have back in the 60s. And so I guess I must have asked my mother at the dime store to get me this plastic guitar, because I just wanted to, I love the sound and the look of all things rock and roll. And my brothers being into it only fortified that influence. And so, yeah, there's a picture of me on stage with this country band that would have been playing at this steakhouse that my father had a part ownership in. And it just happened to be one of the first records I had. Was that guy leading that band was a guy named Chuck Carter, who I got to know again later in life. But I was just, this little kid as a novelty getting on stage with this band. But I vividly remember the waitress after I came off the stage. I went over to the bar to get my orange soda, and she handed me a quarter. Like I actually got money. Right? So, I've told the story many times. I've been paid less for gigs, so that was a good start, though. But I was just, of course, I wasn't playing with the band. I was just there for the photo op, I guess. But they were. I remember the guy there's a guy playing a Les Paul Jr. I remember him trying to show me chords, and
well,
not quite. Well. Well, I was a slow learner initially, but I caught on eventually. But yeah, that's so that there was definitely come from a very musical household in that way, I suppose.
I presume your brothers were big influences on you musically.
Yeah, and still to this day, to be honest, I mean that's something that kind of went up through our lives. And my folks divorced when I was really young, but I'm the youngest of four, and we're all 4 years apart. So my oldest brother would have been 12 the year that I was born in 63. And so again, there's that, he was the perfect record buying age. So literally from the cradle for me, I was just hearing all that British Invasion. But they continued to be influential just because they were my male role models as well. So literally my heroes, in that way.
Did anybody else pursue music like you did professionally?
Well, they both. My oldest brother Mark would have played just some basement bands in the late 60s. But my brother John played a bit of drums, and he had a couple of bands in high school, but nobody went on to pursue it as a profession. My brother John went on to own a very famous record store in Louisville, Kentucky called Ecstasy, and which is kind of an iconic store that Jack Black and the Foo Fighters all played at over the years.
Oh, wow.
They would have gigs there. One of the great independent record stores, but nobody carried on as a musician. So I was the one in the family that took it the most serious, but very much influenced by their passion and their love of music. Certainly formed my early taste. Their record collection became my record collection via hand-me-downs. And then as they went on in the late 60s and early 70s, they were everything Jeff Beck, from the Yardbirds forward. My brother Mark was buying up all those records, and, Wired and Blow by Blow in the 70s. And even, there would be times where whatever stuff they're listening to now, I'll go, hey, what are you guys listening to? And usually it'll be something that I'll resonate with because of that influence and through the way my ears were kind of shaped by whatever they were into. I'm into a lot of different things myself, but my oldest brother Mark and I have a major love for Elvis Costello. So his new record we're both really, really pleased with. But I remember Mark, we're talking about blues. Mark, was one of the white American kids buying BB King records in the late 60s. I vividly remember seeing some of those records and hearing some of those records in his record collection.
So when you heard your brother's records,
Yeah.
did learning how to play the music come easy to you?
Eventually, obviously it's difficult early on, but it would have been my brother John's Rod Stewart record, Every Picture Tells a Story, that it was playing in my bedroom, and I knew a couple of chords. I hit a D chord, and I recognized, well, that's the same chord as what's on the record. I thought, wow, it never dawned on me. I could learn what's on the record if I just apply, So that kind of started the course of me, figuring out some of the songs. And one of my older brother's friends showed me the minor, the pentatonic blues scale or whatever it might be. And from there, I was just getting into like the 70s rock. I was starting to buy some of my own records at the age of 12. And, Kiss, was a big rock group especially for kids that age. It would kind of appealed on the visual level, but there was this great straight rock and roll, and Ace Frehley was kind of a perfect guy to start learning from, because it was just all the classic blues rock stuff that he would have gotten from Clapton, Beck, and Page, and so that was my entry to the soloistic, voice of the guitar, and coming from that American rock, which was from the British blues, which was from American blues. It kept bouncing back and forth across the water, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know you started gigging really early, like at the age of 13.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were you playing at that point? What kind of music was that?
It was all that 70s, exactly what I was talking about. So it would have been Rush and Kiss and Foghat and Ted Nugent, James Gang, UFO, REO Speedwagon. I was in a band. My very first gig was my own 8th grade graduation dance, so I would have been 13. And the drummer in that group actually was good friends with my older brother Brian, who was 4 years older than I. So Glenn Gore was 4 years older than I, and Jimmy Gaines, the bass player he was working with, was a couple years older than Glenn. But they heard about Brian's younger brother that was into guitar, could really play. Like, he heard me in there playing with the Nugent records and Kiss. I said, man, you should hear my brother. He's playing, So I got the gig, and we were power trio. I don't think any of us even sang. Jimmy might have sang a couple of tunes. And so I think the kids would have rather have heard some disco or whatever. There we were playing power trio rock. And I was so terrified. It was because it was like all the kids I went to school with for 8 years, and I'm a shy kid, and it's my first gig, so just absolutely terrified. But, I was with that drummer for the next 7 years. We had just kind of a moving group of different players, but it became a band called Taylor Bay, which ended up being a large local band in that Southwest Indiana area. But it was a great experience because I was gigging from that age on. I was never not in a band from that moment.
So I read somewhere at a very young age, you realized that maybe making it in the band is not the way to go. Maybe that's not the right way to explain it, but that you had an epiphany of sorts that said, I want to be a guitar player, and I don't necessarily want to be, I don't know, commercial or whatever.
Well, yeah, no, I know the quote you're talking about, and it was more like, it just seemed such like a fantasy land, because I grew up in Evansville, Indiana, so somewhat of a smallish, medium-sized Midwest town, and so just being in a band like that would have been on major labels, and it just kind of seemed like fantasy land. Like I would often say it kind of felt like it would be like winning the lottery to get that kind of opportunity, even though that the band that I mentioned, Taylor Bay, we had made a vinyl LP in the early 80s, and then did another batch of sessions, which I was kind of the motivated one in the group. Even though I was the youngest kid in the band, I was sending out tapes to record labels. The band had a really nice sound and a couple of great singers in the band and some really well recorded stuff, and was starting to get getting feedback from the record label saying, hey, yeah, keep in touch. The band sounds great. Let us know what you guys are up to. But by then, I'm in early college and being with a band with some older guys. People were getting married and settled down. And it just kind of felt like I need to kind of find other things to do and to further my playing and stuff, further along my playing career. But I did even before that when I recognized that music was in a guitar was going to be my life. I was reading, the guitar mags, Guitar Player with Tommy Tedesco being a studio player, and reading about Steve Lukather and Larry Carlton being session guys. And that's where I kind of saw myself, well, okay, these guys are great players and they can play, a variety of styles, but they know how to read music. And that's what kind of I encouraged myself to find a teacher. Because even though I was playing professionally and I was a pretty good player at 16, I was, fundamentally doing pretty well and could play well. But I thought, well, I need to learn how to read music and I need to learn more about different styles of music. So I sought out a local teacher in Evansville named Ron Pritchett, who began me, even though I could play. So we're starting with lesson 1, notes on the treble string, just so I could read the music, right?
Right.
But he did see that I had ability, but so he was also a great jazz player. He was into Barney Kessel was his main influence, and Joe Pass. So he started loaning me records with these great jazz players and writing out changes to jazz standards. And I would learn the single note reading, the kind of the homework, but then I would also learn the changes to jazz standards, and he would teach me the voicings of the chords. And so it just kind of sent me down a broader path, of music. And and I just always, anytime I heard guitar in anything, I just wanted to know how to do it. Didn't matter if it was blues or jazz or country or rock. Just, man, what a cool sound. How do you do that?
It's pretty neat that at such a young age that you would have realized that learning to read music was important.
Yeah. Because I was self-taught, I didn't have any experience with that. But again, it was really purely from that, yes, called it an epiphany of like, well, these guys know how to read music and they can play any style. So, what can I do to further that along? And I've been hearing about Ron as like the teacher in town, but I was a shy kid. I remember it taking me 2 weeks to get the courage to even call him. It was just, whatever that was. And then once I got a hold of him and he said, well, I've got a waiting list, but I'll get you in as soon as I can. It took a couple of months. So I was just right before my 16th birthday. I started studying with him, and I was with him until I left Evansville when I was 19. So a good, very important 3 years of my musical growth, where he was really, and I know years later as a teacher myself, when you get a young player that really takes to heart what you're showing them, and I call it the light bulb, and you see that light bulb on, and they're getting what you're showing them. I mean, it's a really special relationship you can have with, between the teacher and student, in that the teacher is really happy to find somebody that really is working and taking in what they're giving. So, and I'm really appreciative when I have somebody like that I feel like I'm really contributing to their growth. It makes you feel great because you want to pass it on. You want to see others have that joy that you have, And so I think he was real happy to have me as a student and really took his time with me and nurtured whatever it was he saw in me.
Well, I presume when you left Evansville, you went to Miami, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So I would have, my first 2 years of college, I stayed in Evansville because the local private college, University of Evansville, they offered a classical guitar program where I knew nothing about classical guitar, but here I was just graduating high school. I was in a local band that was playing 3-4 nights a week, taking lessons from the jazz guy. I thought, well, I can stay in school. Mom will be happy. I looked at a couple other colleges, but I just felt nice to be able to stay in Evansville, stay in my band. Knew nothing about classical guitar, but I thought, well, I'll go to the library and start checking out Julian Bream and Segovia records, and just see what I could learn. And in my audition, I played "Mood for a Day" by Steve Howe, which is not classical guitar, but it was on a nylon string. But I auditioned on a solid body electric guitar because I didn't own a nylon string guitar, but they saw, I guess, that I could play, and they let me in the program. So that teacher, a wonderful guitarist from Milan, Italy, Renato Buteri, once again, I saw my potential. And even though I was, a neophyte when it came to classical music, took me under his wing, and I started, really being exposed to that body of work and just classical music in general, which I hadn't heard any growing up, really.
So when you were 16, and you decided that you wanted to maybe become a studio musician, that it
Yeah.
was important for you to learn how to read notes.
Hmm.
I mean, at that point, you knew this is what you were going to do?
Yeah, there was no doubt, mainly because I had no interest in anything else. I was so wrapped up in it, and I was very fortunate that my mom, who raised me, always encouraged and never discouraged me. She just her mantra was like, whatever it is you want to do with your life, just go for it 1,000%. And so, you know, for a kid with a beer can collection, which was a popular hobby back in the day, and I had Kiss pictures on all four walls and part of the ceiling. My poor mother, like what is this kid into? But she raised me right. She just instilled a good work ethic and did the best she could, working and raising us. And but I was very fortunate that she encouraged me, and when it came time to go to college, helped me with getting loans and all the applying for whatever grants and scholarships. And then in transferring to Miami, which is decidedly kind of a rich kid school, I paid back student loans for years because I was a poor kid from Indiana, but got accepted. The program. I couldn't afford to go down to audition in person. I sent a cassette tape with like a version of Misty and a Santana groove, and just whatever I could put together on a cassette tape. And I was very fortunate to get in because it was a very high level of player that was there when I was there, and just so inspiring, on all levels.
So, what did you hope to get out of school? Was it just exposing yourself to as much music as possible? Did you have a goal in mind as to what you would hope to achieve after you got out?
That's a great question, and the honest answer is I don't think I had a clear idea. I just knew that I had to keep pursuing to the best of my abilities just the art of music and the art of playing guitar. I just kind of had a blind faith that if I work hard enough at this, I'll be okay. You know what I mean? And that's kind of an interesting way to go through life, but I think it's maybe easier when you're younger like that because you just don't really know what's going to happen, on any day. But always having the opportunity to be in a band all the time. When I got to Miami, I ended up in a cover band playing 6 nights a week. And it was complete immersion. And I was around some of the greatest players I'd ever heard, the other students and the faculty at University of Miami. We'd be learning all kinds of stuff and transcribing, Charlie Parker, Chet Baker, Schofield, whoever. And then I'd be out on the gig applying it all on Borderline by Madonna. This is like the best possible, path for a young person to be on, where it's all this education, but then immediate application of those ideas. And you'd be surprised how Parker works over Madonna, if you got some room to blow at the end. But anyway, so it was just kind of idealistic, but I didn't know where it was leading. But I saw other, people getting gigs or getting high, playing on a cruise ship, or one guy got a gig with Bob James. I was like, oh my God, that's the biggest gig I've ever heard of. This is incredible. So I ended up meeting a bass player named Steve Bailey, who's very well known. I think he's he's the head of the bass department at Berkeley now.
Oh.
He had been playing with Dizzy Gillespie and Paquito de Rivera, but he was also a great electric player as well as upright. And he was finishing his undergrad at UM, and he had a drummer that he'd gone to North Texas with in Denton named Ray Brinker, who was out gigging with Maynard Ferguson. But Ray was leaving Maynard's band and wanted to form a rock band. And so, asked Steve if he would join the band. Steve said, yeah. And Ray goes, hey, we need who's the rock guitar player at Miami? And I was the only rock guitar player. There was a lot of great jazz and fusion, but I was definitely the rock guy. And we were all learning from each other. So I met Steve and Ray, and we played, and then we ended up moving to Denton, where they had gone to school, which is another famous jazz school, North Texas State University. Though I never went to school there, I had the benefit of living in Denton because it was such a great, kind of a hippie feeling town, and it was just so many great players, So I got that gig, and that led to me forming my own trio, the Andy Timmons Band, and that cassette tape is what got circulated. It was kind of at when virtuosic rock guitar was really in vogue because Satriani was having success with Surfing with the Alien, Steve Vai, Yngwie, and guys like that. And that's, really where I wanted to go. But then the Danger Danger gig came along. And that was, even though I'd gone through all this other stuff, thinking making it in a rock band was going to be impossible. Here comes this rock band, and that's what I ended up doing. It was a full circle kind of moment.
I find that interesting because of
Yeah.
you thinking, well, it's like winning the lottery, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you kind of won the lottery. But before you won the lottery,
Right.
you auditioned for Bad English,
Yes.
and you also auditioned for Tower of Power.
Yes. You've done your homework, man.
Well,
Yeah. Sometimes I skirt those things because definitely a part of my path, but not many people know about it. So I bring it up occasionally. But this is very cool that you did because it's quite a crossroads I found myself in.
well, I can imagine because all this happened at the same time.
It did.
I find it interesting that you went to school, you did your rock,
Yeah.
you learned from Nugent and from
Yeah.
Frehley,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you also did your classical music, and then you got into more jazz. At
Yeah.
this point, do you know who Andy Timmons is as a player? Do you have an idea of what your sound is and what your music is?
That's not even something I even thought about. You know what I
Interesting.
mean? It's something that I think happened just kind of organically through all these different things, that I got into. I always bring up David Bowie because he has a wonderful way of putting it when he talked about, he would not say he was an innovator. He's called himself a collector. And
Right.
of course, all of our heroes, they can talk about their heroes. And if you look at Stevie Ray, he'll talk about, Hendrix and all the Kings, Albert and Freddie and BB. And so for me, it was the '70s and the Beatles but all this other music somehow I was becoming me, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you at that time what that was. I'm still figuring it out. I think it took me to be in my 50s to where I started to be comfortable being me.
Interesting.
And I say that sincerely. But going back to the kind of the crossroads thing, it was I had gotten my tape to Buddy Blaze, who was artist relations guy for Kramer Guitars. He had heard about me through a friend of his here in Texas, and because Bad English was looking for a guitar player, so I initially did audition for them, got the gig, strangely enough. But then Neil Sean came in at the end of my first week, who'd done the demos, declined the gig because he'd had a solo record that was coming out on Columbia, and that was going to be his focus. But then for whatever reason, he changed his mind. And so clearly, Half a Journey is who's this unknown kid from Texas? The John Waite used to call me the Waco Kid, even though wait, that's the Waco Kid. He still, whenever I see John Waite, he still calls me the Waco Kid. But right at that time, that had fallen through. Steve Grove is a friend of mine, a tenor player that had gone to Miami and he was in Tower of Power, and he happened to call me and say, "Hey, we're coming to town and our guitar player's leaving. Can you come sit in?" Yeah, of course. And it went great. And they offered for me to come out and maybe join the band right when the tape had got into Danger's hands, and they were signed and they were ready to go. They just needed a guitar player to do the gig. And so it was interesting because, the more muso kind of gig would have been more naturally what was in my heart. I'd have been happy if Miles Davis called. I would like to have been the next Mike Stern, even though I'd probably not that level, but I'm just, my options were many as far as what I would have liked to have done. The Danger thing was a struggle for me to decide, but I think that it was the allure of the major label and, the MTV and tours and all that. So it did, and it was all that. It was kind of this unrealizable childhood dream that actually did come true. But at the end of the day, as much as I thought that would be the holy grail of what I thought a career in music would be, it almost was the antithesis because it got very far removed from why I love to play my instrument and the type of music that I love to play with my instrument. It started with rock and I was having a good time doing it, but yeah, I was practicing every day like I was back in school and writing what became my first instrumental record. So I learned a lot about myself in that time. Fortunately, I was young enough and old enough. I had young enough where I had a great time because we toured and had all these experiences, but old enough to where I didn't do anything stupid that I remember anyway. And but it also it did help me kind of figure out who I was, at least to the next level, what I wanted and what I didn't want. And so it was clearly not the major label or money or fame that none of that was important to me. And that became real obvious when it just got down to making the music that I want to make and owning that music.
Did you
You know?
feel like,
Yeah.
I mean, they're a very catchy band, very glitzy.
Yeah, no, it was glam glam rock, hair band, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Yeah.
As talented as you are with the education, musical education you had, did it seem below you? And I don't mean to minimize the
No.
music because
Well,
you sold a lot of records and you had
there
big
was
fans and
yeah, and again, I tread a delicate line here because certainly after when the band kind of fell apart when it did in 92, 93, there was a period of time where I kind of felt embarrassed by it, meaning that I so wanted to establish myself as a quote unquote, a serious musician. And that music, was pretty much straight ahead. And some of the lyrics were very sexual in nature, and that's the stuff where I kind of was like, I'm not writing the lyrics here, folks. But they were catchy tunes for what it was. And what I always had to remember and what I really know more now than ever is that, like Kiss was for me when I was 13, that music, that band and that genre was for other people that were 12 and 13 while we were doing it. So it's important to them because when you're that age, that music that you take in is a part of you for the rest of your life in a way that you can hear something today and it might be great and it might be cool, but it's not going to be with you like that music was at that time in a life when life is changing, man. Your body's changing, all kinds of crazy stuff. I still have this huge bag of fan mail that I got from primarily a lot of young girls back in that late 80s. Yeah, there was a lot of love letter kind of things, right? But a lot of them were like, man, my family life is really effed up. And if it wasn't for this song or this music, whatever it was they were, resonating with, it was so important to them. And I respect it. And I have such appreciation for that. But the musician, part of me, yeah, I mean, I'm a rock guitar player from the foundation because of what I learned from all the 70s rock guys. So I would never say beneath. It's just it's a certain segment of my abilities.
right.
But believe me, I'd stretch out on solos at the end of tunes, when we're touring or whatever. And I'm bopping out and I'm Pat Martino. In my mind, I'm Pat Martino and, just with hair and in a heavy guitar sound,
And you got the
So-
tour with Kiss.
I mean, talk about, because that Kiss was my first concert in '76, Robert Stadium, Evansville, Indiana, on the Destroyer tour, and I'm in the nosebleeds, going, this is what I want to do, but it just never dawned on me. So if that was '76, 1990, what is that? 14 years later, there I am opening up every night and talking to Gene and Paul. Again, Fantasyland, but Danger provided some really great experiences. I love the guys in the band dearly. There's a lot of brotherhood, a lot of love there. As much craziness as a band goes through, especially when you're even at the level of fame we were at, which was just kind of medium. It's a lot going on when it comes down to the travel and press and money, and it gets complicated real fast.
So being associated with a major label.
Yeah.
At one point, you said that would be a dream. That would be a lottery, winning a lottery. But once you were in there and you see the realities of what that means, and I presume that means there's a lot of money backing you up and spent on the band, which also means that you're also kind of in debt quite a bit.
Money you're not ever going to see.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
But is that an eye-opening situation for you? Like whatever you had as a dream to say, wow, it would be neat to be signed to a major label, to actually experience that and to go through and have some success with the band.
Yeah.
Was it surprising to you what the reality was?
Yeah, very much so. And I was just a naive kid from Indiana. And not that I had any unrealistic expectations of like, this is going to be a bazillion dollars and it's going to be easy. I didn't think that, but it became clearer and clearer that, the musician and the artist is just the lowest on the totem pole. It's just a huge corporate business and it's run that way. So it's easy to get your your ideals kind of hurt and your feelings hurt a little bit when it's like, okay, just because I'm a good person doesn't mean I'm going to be treated fairly. Right. And that's okay. That's just part of the learning process. But when the real defining thing for me was we made a third record for Epic called Cockroach, and it was really at the tail end of when MTV was playing bands like that, and we had Pearl Jam and Seattle and rap, all great stuff,
Mm-hmm.
that was really becoming the focus. And so the band just, I mean, the label just decided they were, even after jumping up and down, like, you guys have made the greatest record and being all about it. Then all of a sudden, well, we're not going to put it out. And so the band kind of dissolved, at least at that current time. And then, but the label made it impossible for the band to get the rights to the record.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, why would you ever work so hard and put your heart and soul into something that doesn't belong to you? So from there on, my career has totally been based on me just wanting to make the music I want to make, but I'm going to own it. I'm not going to, of course, the industry is very different now, but back then most artists really did need a major label to get it out there on any large scale. Now we have the internet, and so many people are just putting their own product out, and they can do just fine doing it. There were a few people doing it back then, from George Thorogood, maybe Andy DeFranco, some early independent artists that did very well on their own, but it was harder without the machinations of the major label.
If we go back
Hmm.
to that time, that period of your life where you were auditioning and getting these different opportunities
Yeah.
with Tower Power, with Bad
Yeah.
English, with Danger Danger. Tell me what it is about you that that these opportunities were afforded to you, and that you almost, you could have had any of those gigs, or you had any of those gigs.
Yeah. I, you know, a quote comes to mind. There was a Kramer guitar rep named Don Ellis. Now, when I first joined Danger Danger, he and I would travel around when the band wasn't touring and do guitar clinics for Kramer. And I think we were just driving one day and asked me, "How did you get the gig in Danger Danger?" And I just said, "Well, I guess I just got lucky." And he shot back at me. He said, "No, you didn't get lucky. You worked your ass off for years, and when you had the opportunity, you were ready." And I thought, I will change my answer now, because I instantly recognized I was being humble and just like, oh, I don't know, I guess I got lucky. And there might have been, there's fortune that comes into play, and who you meet and who, might be able to help you in some way that you've crossed paths with. But the bottom line is that he was right. I'd worked, and still do to this day. I work hard to try to, keep improving as a player, and whatever skills I'd honed as a human being, just getting along in the world, and with the way you deal with people. But he was right. These opportunities came, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to fall through or will be, wanted after that audition. Right. So there was some good fortune involved, certainly, but it was really the foundation of having worked so hard on something, but it never felt like work. And I didn't realize, how seriously I was, cultivating these abilities while they were happening. It was just my nature. I was driven for whatever reason to do it. There was nobody telling me, "Hey kid, you better practice." I couldn't wait to do it. And it was just, I had no other passion in my life quite like that.
So when you were with Danger Danger and you were still practicing like crazy,
Yeah.
at that point, do you know, based on the experiences you had with that band, based on the
Yeah.
business of music, did you know what, were you getting closer to defining who you were?
Yeah, I might have been. I think by the time I'd gone through that, and then with all my collective experiences that I'd had before that, leading up to my first solo CD, which was called Ecstasy. Yeah, I think at that point I was starting to arrive, though I was still, there's a few tracks on there that are very Satriani like, and there's some Hendrix, influence stuff on there. But I do remember coming home one break from school when I was in Miami. So this might have been 83, 84. And I'm sitting playing with a friend of mine that had kind of been growing up with me and seeing me start to excel and go forward with my career. And we're playing together one day, and he goes, I wish you could hear you." And it was an interesting thing to say, but I knew what he meant. Like, sometimes you're so inside of it, you can't see yourself as other people see you, right? Or recognize the things that are maybe starting to become some of your signature, that somebody else might pick up on and go, oh yeah, that's you. Or that I recognize that because, I hear that in your playing. I was too close to it. I wasn't hearing it. But again, I think just by the general constant pursuit, I think sometimes about a guy like Yngwie or Eddie Van Halen that just seemed to be so fully formed pretty early on, obviously with a huge amount of work.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that it took me longer to get to a place where maybe I have an identifiable voice now at the age of 58, because I had so many different things I was drawing from, and I'm still a fan, and maybe to a benefit, maybe to a detriment, that I still revere and admire so many artists, now some younger than me. I used to have a problem with, oh yeah, he's really young. I don't like him. I don't like him as much. But like I used to talk about Derek Trucks and Eric Gales being my favorite players under 50. It was an important delineation. I've always been the kid, and all my heroes were the older guys. But now I got plenty of heroes that are younger, and it's cool to get to a place where you're comfortable with that. You know what I mean? There's just so many up and coming players that have ridiculous facility.
Okay, so I'm curious about being an instrumental guitar player.
Okay.
Because I know you can sing. I know that there are definitely singing on your albums.
Yeah. On some stuff, yeah.
But your focus is mainly instrumental music. Right. So is it because of Satriani's success that you think this is a possibility? Like, what's the mindset in going in and becoming an instrumental guitarist?
It was a big thing. Surfing with the Alien was it. If you were a guitar player, in your teens or late teens or early 20s, when that record came out, you could not want to do that. It was just. But Joe, the reason why Joe had so much success was that not only could he, he had Van Halen and Billy Gibbons kind of vocabulary, but obviously beyond that as well, he had his own thing. But he wrote cool tunes. It's like we weren't missing the singer so much. It's going to be a lot of guitar players are going to dig it, but it also crossed over to mainstream because there was cool melodies and good energy and good sound. So, definitely, that's one of the fondest periods of my life, is putting that on my Sony cassette Walkman, and walking around Denton going, man, this is what I want to do. It was just that idea that, this can be done, and I just play guitar. And what a cool place to even if you're just fantasizing about it or envisioning it. But it's like, we love this instrument so much and the potential that it has for expression. Yeah, we don't have to wait for the solo. We are the solo, the whole damn song. I mean, it's in a very selfish way, but it's so much fun.
But you're more than just solo. It's there's melody, and there's so much. Yeah. Your playing has so much melody to it, or it's so melodic. And I would imagine if it was just shredding, then it wouldn't be as interesting.
Well, yeah. Well, that's the thing. That's what Joe brought along in his own way, of course, is that there were cool tunes, and for me, I'm a fan of the quote unquote shred style of guitar playing, but I'm not gonna listen to it for lengthy periods of time. I'm more drawn to great melody, whether it comes from the guitar or not. I'm not specific to, it's got to be guitar music. I love great piano music. This last couple of years, Chopin has been my main composer I've been just kind of obsessed with. So I do get that from the people that get to know my music. They generally come back with that kind of comment about the melody, whether it's the actual composition itself or even in the solo sections, if there are solos in the song. There's hopefully not just this platform for demonstration of ability, but it's an expression of music. And I think that's very different than saying it's a solo, right? That a solo can be an opportunity to be showy, and sometimes the song benefits from that, right? I like a good balance. Hopefully, is the goal, and just trying to be musical.
So when you work with songs with lyrics, Is your approach to writing or to playing quite different than to instrumental tracks?
It can be depending, yeah, because if I'm not the singer via the guitar, then I have to find, what's gonna support that lyric and that vocal in the best possible way. So, but that's easy for me only because that the majority of my playing experience, though I've had a lot of experience in instrumental music, of course, but just the years of playing in bands, be it Danger Danger or just cover bands, or I worked with Olivia Newton-John for 15 years. It's just how I approach any piece of music at any point in time. It's like, what is going to serve the song the best? What's gonna, and it might not be playing at all. It might just be using my volume knob to good effect. Just recognizing everything that's happening and just trying to make sure that if I'm going to do something, that it's going to be something that's beneficial and not detrimental. Right.
How did you get the Olivia Newton-John gig?
That was oddly enough through Simon Phillips.
Oh,
I've been playing with Simon back in the 90s. We started doing some touring together in 97. And yeah, he was still in Toto, but when he wasn't doing stuff with Toto, I ended up doing a couple of records and a lot of tours with him, especially over in Europe. And this goes to the late 90s, and I got a message on my phone from Simon saying that Olivia Newton-John was looking for a guitar player. Well, Olivia's management was Fitzgerald Hartley, which managed Toto from day one. And so Olivia had retired in the early 90s, had breast cancer, and decided she was going to stay home and take care of her daughter. But then started doing a couple of gigs in Australia and decided she wanted to do a tour in the States. And an Australian band was coming over. The John Farnham backing band was going to back her up. She was going to do a tour. But Brett Garsed, one of the guitar players, couldn't make it. He had some previous commitment. So word of mouth through management. Hey, who knows a guitar player? Toto guys, well, I know Andy, he's a good player, So Simon, just kind of recommended me, and I agreed to do the gig, and it was like 2 months of tour dates in the States, and it went so well, and she and I got on so well, and the management saw how hard I'd worked to really do the gig the best I could. They made me the music director and formed a US based group. And so it became, 15 years of a larger part of my income. And she was perfect to work with because she didn't do that much. It'd be like month here, a couple weeks here, just kind of sprinkled out through the year. So I still had time to do Simon's thing and had time for my own thing. And one of my fondest musical relationships I've ever had. She's a dear friend and just remarkable musician. Her pitch and her time are incredible. She's retired now. She's not likely to get out and tour anymore, but we're still great friends and very fond of our time together.
What did you learn from that time?
I just learned about integrity and grace. Not that I didn't have experience with it before that, but I saw how she handled her life and the music, all with great respect and grace. It was really incredible. And she went through, I saw her go through some serious ups and downs in her life,
Mm-hmm.
and just really learned from her in that way. Just the remarkable energy she had and has, is pretty incredible. And the body of work too, it was very fun to play. A lot of her tunes were written by a guitar player named John Ferrer. He's a great guy, great guitar player. And so there's lots of interesting parts to play. And for me, it wasn't about what can I do to, show off Andy Timmons here. I'm there to help Olivia sound as great as she can sound. But that's why I was there for 15 years, because I had that respect for her and the music, and the band that we had put together had the similar mindset. That was so important, And so she would have a great time because she had this great loving support group with her. And we all just wanted to lift her up the best we can.
That little kid who said, I want to be Steve Lukather and go into the studio.
Yeah.
You were able to achieve that in Dallas for a while, right?
Yeah, I did, and still do a little bit, but the scene has changed dramatically. But yeah, in the late 80s, before I moved to New York for Danger Danger, I was doing quite a bit of studio work. And then when I moved back after Danger Danger in 93, continued to do, quite a bit of jingle work and some record stuff. And that's all, I really enjoy that. It's a different thing, especially the TV and radio jingle thing where it's 60 seconds or 90 seconds, whatever it might be. And it might be, hey, you got to sound like this guy, or be Steve Cropper here, or be, Brian Setzer. I love that. I absolutely love that challenge of getting into the composer's headset, like what are they wanting? What are they trying to? Because I don't always have to be me. I can sometimes they want me, which is nice, but sometimes it's kind of being a chameleon and just doing what's going to be best for this quirky piece of music, whatever it might be, you know.
Tell me about your new album.
Well, this is a really fun record for me, just because it was a little bit off the beaten path. This is great guitar player I'd gotten to know named Josh Smith, who I think is most known on the blues scene. But I started seeing him on YouTube. He just started coming into my feed and started watching this guy and listening to this guy play. And I just loved what I was hearing, because it was obviously steeped in blues, but you could hear the jazz and I could hear the Danny Gatton. And there was just a lovely hybrid of styles that I really love. And I don't know how I got Josh's number, but I somehow got in touch with him just to say, hey, man, I freaking love what you're doing. You sound great. You know, it's just nice to be able to reach out sometimes and tell somebody that. And we really hit it off. And he was aware of my music and liked my stuff. And we were just becoming friends. He said, hey, man, I just finished putting my studio together out in LA. You should come out and record. And, you know, over the course of your career, you meet so many people and you'll say, hey, let's get together. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, it never happens just because people are busy. But the NAMM show was coming up. The January NAMM that's in Anaheim was approaching maybe a few months down the road. And I said, yeah, well, I'll be out there in January. He said, yeah, come out 3 days early. So the deal is that he was inviting me to come play, but I said, look, you know, let's both write tunes, but I'll be the artist. I want you to produce and you put the band together. Because every time I saw him with any of the groups he was playing with, the players were always just killing. Everything had a great feel. I just liked where he was sitting musically. And I thought, I want you to steer this. You know, you pick the players. I'm just going to come out and play. We'll put the tunes together. We'll arrange it. And that's exactly how it happened. It was largely his main circle of players. It was Lamar Carter on drums and Travis Carlton on bass and Darren Johnson on keyboards. And from note one, we just got along great, you know. And so it was a really a fun thing, just because it was going to have a different feel than Andy Timmons' band. Of course, I still love working with my own band, but you know, every time you work with a different set of players, it's going to bring different parts of your personality out. It's like when you pick up a different guitar, you know, it's going to encourage certain things. So there's a lot of the record that's just like the first kind of single, quote unquote, we put out a couple of weeks ago. It's called EWF, which is kind of a funky homage to Al McKay and Earth, Wind and Fire.
Oh, okay. And I didn't know what it was referring to. The
EWF. Yeah, the EWF thing. It's very much. Oh God, what's the name of the song? It's that, you know, that's that. Well, that's my tune goes like this: is it's this kind of funky swinging thing, but it meant to sound like Shining Star. I was always a big fan of that song, and I never knew what that part was, because it was obviously a couple different guitars. So that's me just kind of imitating the feel. But just a couple of weeks ago, I found a clip of Al McKay. He'd done an instructional video in the 80s, you know, and he said, it's 2 parts. And in one part, and the other part, so it's those 2 parts just overdubbed. And so I'm not trying to actually play the tune, but it's just, I was just kind of coming up with a groove that felt like that. You know what I mean? And so that's a very thinly veiled reference to Earth, Wind and Fire, and very much an Al McKay loving tribute, man. I just love the feel of it. And that was a fun track to put out first, because it's funky, which is a little different than my normal rock and roll thing. Though I've played a lot of that style just over my lifetime. But it's a completely live track. That's all.
Wow.
All the solos and everything was just live. All of us playing together.
I know. I heard it yesterday on Spotify, so it's a great tune. And I was lucky enough to get a copy of the album, so I've heard all of it. And it's fantastic.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Tell me about your confidence as a player, because you know, the fact that you had these opportunities offered to you must give you confidence. But tell me about your personal confidence and Is it
That's
something
a
you have greatly of, or is it something you struggle with, or?
it's a great topic, and I'll be as honest as you want me to be. Basically, I can't say I'm overly confident. I would err on the opposite side of that, where even in some of these greatest moments, I might just be terrified. Part of there's an inherent insecurity that I've always had that I don't know is a bad thing. If that makes any sense,
No, it
I
makes a
think
lot of sense.
if I thought that I was just the greatest freaking player ever, I wouldn't play the same way. You know what I mean? I think there's just a real humanity to what I do in that I'm honest. I know I'm not the world's greatest player. I believe enough in myself to think that I do have things to offer on the right day. It doesn't happen every time, but the intent is there for it. I want it to be the greatest thing you ever heard. I mean, I think any artist, any writer, any improviser, we're trying our best to rise to the level of what we really love. For me, I might have Stevie Ray or Eric Johnson or Albert King or Hendrix or whoever, or Lukather is a big influence on me. Any of these guys that I've loved so much, I might have them in my head when I'm trying to achieve what I'm achieving in my own voice, of course. But I never know if I'm going to get there. I don't have that kind of confidence. I have enough humility to know that I have potential. I know it can be really good. And the harder I work at it, the more consistent it can be. That's one of the things that I really got back into a more steady practicing. There was a time in my life where, with life and career, once you're way out of school and you're just taking care of all the things in life you got to take care of, if you're not making genuine practice a part of your regular regimen, that it kind of went away from me. Even though I was playing a lot, I was always, if I picked up a guitar, it'd be more like writing or just soloing around. But I recognized at a certain point in my life that I'd gotten away from being that student. And once I got back into that practice, boy, man, my life got happier because even though I got back into working on jazz and I was really not sounding very good, where at one point I might have been a better jazz player. And I started working on it, and it was hard to hear myself suck like that, knowing that at one point maybe I had it more together. And so, but just the dedication and having just made my mind up, that simple distinction of I'm going to do this. And it took months, but I started recognizing the improvement, little bits. But I also started recognizing the difference in my overall well-being. And I just mean on a very spiritual, personal level, that I was happier because, I was sounding better. But through that, I knew whatever gift I'd been given, I knew I was honoring that on a more dedicated level, not just doing enough to get by for gigs and keeping things going, which I was doing. It wasn't that I wasn't playing that poorly. It was just I wasn't working as hard as I had once worked when I was in college, and recognizing that as a very happy time in my life. Like I mentioned, being in school all day, being surrounded by great players. If I wasn't on the gig or in school, I was with, hey man, what are you doing? Let's go sit and play some standards, right? So I found a local buddy of mine here in the town where I live, and we started getting together a couple times a week just to play standards and just to kind of get back to that perpetual, student kind of mindset. And I've found that's the key for I know we're talking about confidence here, but also happiness, that just, I feel like, okay, at least I may not be the greatest I can be today, but boy, I'm working towards it. And maybe I'll have a better day, and maybe I'll learn some new stuff, or I might take a step back, whatever it is. But as long as you just keep making that effort, boy, it just makes a huge difference. And we'll certainly add, I started doing some local jazz gigs. So there had to be a certain amount of confidence for me to get out there and do that, even though I wasn't anywhere near where I like to have been. But you got to do it. You just got to get out there and the jazz thing is always, even though I'm primarily known as a rock player, there's so much I get from just the listening and having, enjoyed that style of music and played that style of music so much. It very much has influenced and, informed all my note choice, just the way that I navigate through chord changes, just will be a lot different than just a straight ahead rock player that might be drawing from a particular scale or they're in one key. I'm considering that, but I'm way more aware of just individual chords as they're happening and how I'm going to treat that with tension and release. But I got so much of that from the study of jazz. So,
You mentioned
yeah.
a little while ago that you thought you kind of found who you were, had an idea who you were as a player
Yeah.
in your 50s, not too long ago.
Still there, yeah.
And I realized that for somebody like yourself, it's an ongoing pursuit.
Sure.
But what was it about that time or that album that made you think this is closer to who I really think I am?
I think it's just kind of a general, gradually evolving thing. But I think part of me saying that I've found out who I was realizing that I was getting more comfortable with just being me and not thinking that I had to be all these other people. If that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
that it's easy to be envious of all the great players that are out there, past, present, and future. So sometimes it's hard not to be overwhelmed, at least for me personally, and I can sense that it's that way for some others. That it's easy to be overwhelmed by the amount of ability that has come to fruition on the instrument. Though I feel like we're still scratching the surface, right? I think that there's a very few players that I can look to that really reach me on a deeply emotional level, and I think of Jeff Beck. I think of Pat Metheny, and I'm aspiring, trying to head to that place where by writing some material that resonates with people, or just being able to articulate certain emotions on the guitar. There's a tune on the record called "When Words Fail." It's just a ballad,
Mm-hmm.
pretty simple ballad, but it just kind of alludes to the fact that the spoken language and written language is very finite. Where well played music can really just touch a different part of the soul and the heart, right? And be it on the guitar or whatever it might be. Like I say, I was really resonating with Chopin the last couple of years, and of all the composers, he reaches me emotionally very differently and uniquely than anybody else, whatever that is. But I've been studying the heck out of it, because I hear some of the things in what I try in the way that I write, and some things that he done, in the early Romantic period. I'm not saying my writing sounds like Chopin. I'm not trying to say that at all, but the things that I think those times when I get to that place, I hear him doing it too. And so it's wonderful for me to find that, to study, and just to kind of see what it is about that moves me the way that it does,
I'm
Yeah.
sorry to ask this because I think it's a
Yeah.
silly question, but
It's okay.
as an instrumental songwriter,
Yeah.
how do you come up with song titles? Is it driven by are things? Does the song title come up start first and then you write this thing, or do you write the whole piece and it reminds you of something? How do you title your songs?
Not a silly question at all. That's a great question for any instrumental music. Um, a lot of tunes for me, well, especially the ballads tend to be specifically influenced pieces of music, like Gone. That was this piece. Written on 9/11. And it was a song that came. I wasn't even thinking about it. Just the emotion of the day and all these things that were happening in our lives.
Did it come right through you? Was that like a one take thing?
No, well, the song. I just think I started recognizing that some melodies were happening, and then had a cassette player there to document it. Then did a demo of it when I got back after we left. I was on tour with Olivia on that day, and I recorded this little demo of it and didn't think anything of it, just other than that it was just documented how I felt that day. Then one of the band members heard it and said, "Man, we need to record that." I'm like, I feel weird about recording this song, but once I did, and people, understood what the inspiration was, it really meant a lot to a lot of people. I had a lot of people would write into the website or whatever, and So you know, there are those pieces of music that are very specific to a particular emotion, and then there are songs like I admittedly I'm sitting in the room where a lot of these songs happen, where my band will just be jamming, and it's just a groove and it's a feel good kind of thing. You know, well, what are we going to call this? You know, so that then at that point you got to think about, well, what does it remind me of? And so there's a variety of ways, but I think certainly my favorite compositions are ones that are very specifically emotion influenced, you know, or event influenced. And it could be something in my life or somebody else's life, but yeah, those are the ones that tend to have a very specific meaning. But because there's no lyrics, it can literally mean anything to anybody. You know, sometimes it'll be influenced if I divulge to people, though this song was written for, you know, somebody that passed away or whatever it might be, and so they might then take the song in that way for some loss in their life. You know, there's a couple of songs I wrote called "That Day Came" and another one called "On Your Way, Sweet Soul" that were very much written uh, with loss in mind. And so people, man, they you know can take that into their heart, and it gives them the place to feel those emotions, to kind of a soundtrack for what they're going through in a way. And there's no bigger honor as a composer or a player to, you know, for people to accept your music in that way, and have it mean something, you know, not just to, and it, but not that I wouldn't mind if people just dug my music for just, it was cool jamming, but you know, you do, you know, I do have a loftier goal. I have that. I have, you know, I would like to have this music have some meaning when it's appropriate, but sometimes it's just a groove. You know, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, as somebody once said.
Was there a point when you know, at a young age, you thought, this, I want to do an instrumental album. That's the kind of thing that I feel like doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because I can't imagine how difficult it is to establish yourself in that genre, and to actually, you know, at some point or another, you made a name for yourself. At some point or another, you find yourself on stage with Steve Vai and Joe Satriani. And so was there a point where you thought, my God, not that you've made it, because who knows what that means, but
Exactly.
that you thought, well, I've come to the place that I was hoping to get to?
Yeah, I look at that first instrumental record, Your Ecstasy, as kind of feeling that way a little bit. I think, you know, because it, you know, even locally here in Dallas, it got a lot of radio play, and people were recognizing me as, you know, somebody that they thought was on the level of those guys, though I might not have pictured myself at that level at that time. You know, I was definitely headed that direction, and I think eventually for those guys specifically, and Eric Johnson, and some of my heroes, you know, Mike Stern, that, you know, treat me with a lot of respect and really, you know, love my playing, and accept me as a peer. You know, it's I think it's because I had older brothers, and they were a big reason why I started playing, and why, you know, they were the ones I wanted to impress, you know what I mean? And so these players that I'm mentioning are kind of like older brothers in that way too. And I kind of feel like there was a quote that, you know, Gene Simmons once famously said, "If anybody says they play music for any other reason but to get laid is full of shit." You know, well, you know, that might have been a fine, you know, thing for some, but yeah, that was never in the cards for me. I was amazed when there were girls at gigs eventually, but no, it was all about just wanting to participate in this thing that we love so much, and really wanting the appreciation and approval of my older brothers, which were kind of father figures in a way, heroes in a way. But so then for players, you know, that I really respect and look up to and consider heroes, for them to have that respect and you know, lifting me up in their own way, that's where I feel, regardless of any sales or success, that stuff you can't buy, and the stuff that means the most to me, you know.
My final question to you is, tell me about the relationship between you and your guitar. What is that?
Oh, wow. It's love, man. It's and this guitar I'm playing now is the prototype that Ivan has made for me in '94. And but I do have, you know, several others around the house. I try not to play it as much. It's been refretted 8 times. Some say 9, but I think it's 8. My luthier says it's just going to disintegrate one day, which is fair enough. So I better have some backup. But it's an ongoing, evolving relationship, in that there's a certain part of it that's extremely comfortable, and like I say, it's always there for me. But I treat it with such respect and with such reverence. I know that there's so much more to the relationship that hasn't, you know, the seed's been planted but hasn't grown completely yet. So it's still with excitement and frustration and reverence that I still treat it. It's like any relationship, you gotta keep working on it. If you just let it go and don't nurture it, it's going to fall apart, right? So it's something that, yeah, it still frustrates me. It still gives me unconditional love at the same time. It's got a lot of dynamic, but I think with any great relationship, you have to have all that, right? Otherwise, I mean, again, like if I thought I was the master of all masters, it wouldn't have the same allure. If I thought I've got this completely down, what else is next? You'd be off to gardening or whatever, and or who knows what. But I'm happy that I still have that same drive, and probably more now than ever, to keep trying to figure some stuff out, and not only to participate in what I've enjoyed in the past and admire about others, but to continue to forge whatever it is that I have to offer, and keep trying to discover that and let that reach its potential, whatever it might be.
Nicely put, Andy. It's a real pleasure meeting you. I've really enjoyed listening to your music, and the guitar playing just blows me away.
Oh, thank you, man.
And thank you so much for spending this time.
I'm very happy to do so. I hope I'll see you in Toronto one of these days, once we're able to get out of the house safely and
yeah, that would
without stress, etc.
All right.
Until then, I'll be sitting here doing concerts from my house, I guess.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mako. Appreciate you, man.